Chubby military personnel are getting liposuction to pass the Pentagon's body fat test. The DoD method of estimating body fat is considered unfair because it knocks out personnel with muscular builds. They claim that the military's fitness standards are outdated and don't reflect that Americans are bigger. They can get kicked out of the military if they don't pass the test. Lastly, the number of American soldiers booted for being overweight has jumped tenfold in the past 5 years. Defense officials are saying only a small fraction of those exceed body fat limits perform well on physical fitness tests. Those incidences are far and few between, says the director of the Navy's Physical Readiness Program. Those who fail are ordered to spend months in vigorous exercise nutrition program, which Marines call the pork chop platoon or the donut brigade. Even if they later pass, failing the test once can halt promotions for years. And the DoD wants to use satellites to look inside others' cultures. So geography is a social science that examines human activities and behavior in the context of locations. In fact, the U.S. Special Operations Command is awarding a contract to GEOI Analytics for a special human geography information system that uses a unique satellite constellation for collecting data in areas not commercially available. They collect information with basically a history, culture, economy, religion, political landscapes. It says the human geography system can map and even predict stresses that may change the dynamics of a target area as it relates to regional security. They're specifically looking for data on political parties, schools, religious institutions, internet cafe locations, business conducting mining and mineral surveys. These data sets, in conjunction with detailed satellite images, will presumably help the Special Forces Command. The contractor is supposed to provide geospatially referenced socio-cultural data on a number of countries. It says that this up-to-date topographical information overlaid with human data about an area can be a huge advantage for troops trying to head into unfamiliar territory. I throw these articles in there because it seems to kind of tie together a little bit. Russian Proton-M lifts off with U.S. telecom satellite from the 25th. A rocket-carrying U.S. telecom satellite lifted off on Friday from Kazakhstan. It's a high-power geostationary satellite. It says it's actually for the Sirius XM, America's largest radio broadcaster. And Russia and the U.S. are uniting to basically sign an agreement to work on nuclear weapons to tackle the dangers of asteroids. I've covered this before too, from the 16th. And I included that because of this article from the 28th. The UN wants to save us from asteroids, from asteroid defense, or it's really about the militarization of space. Former astronauts proposed a plan to deal with dangerous rocks. General Assembly last week gave the green light to an asteroid defense plan drawn up by former astronauts. They call for member nations to join forces in an international asteroid warning group committed to sounding alarm if a dangerous rock is spotted. Spacecraft would be launched to knock the asteroid off. It says that there's actually a small chance of a big asteroid hitting us in 2013. Right now, no nation has an explicit responsibility to defend against an asteroid. Google may be building a large floating data center in San Francisco Bay that's made out of shipping containers and will possibly harness the motion of waves to generate electricity. This is from CNET. So it says here something big is basically rising from the floating barge at the end of Treasure Island, a former Navy base. And they don't know what's inside the structure. It stands about 4 stories high, maybe with a series of modern cargo containers. But it goes on here and it says that it's all but certain that Google is the entity that is building the massive structure that's in plain sight but behind tight security. Then you can meet the private companies that are helping cops spy on protesters from the Rolling Stone. While the specifics of which police departments utilize what surveillance technologies is often unclear. There's evidence to suggest that the use of mass surveillance against individuals not under direct investigations pretty common, but the default is mass surveillance, the same as the NSA's collect it all mindset. There's not a single company that, if you install their product, would comply with what anyone without a security clearance would think is appropriate lawful use. And here's your friendly local sheriff's office. SWAT team raids investigate journalist's home, confiscate confidential DHS files. An investigative journalist says federal agents raided her home earlier this year and confiscated the notes that she used to report on a government cover-up. Now she fears that her sources have been compromised. She's Audrey Hudson told the Daily Caller that the files were taken during a SWAT raid in her Maryland home this past August, part of an investigation into her husband. They said he unlawfully possessed a number of firearms. Authorities had reason to believe that Flanagan was amassing a gun collection despite being legally barred from owning firearms due to a previous conviction. It's the state police and Department of Homeland Security that participated in the raid, because Flanagan was employed by the Coast Guard, which is considered a division of DHS. He also pilfered his wife's personal documents during the armed raid. BBC asked if conspiracy theories are destroying democracy. The more information we have about governments and corporations and what they're up to, the less we seem to trust them. It says, will conspiracy theories eventually destroy democracy? This is from the BBC, yeah. That's what they want you to think, they say. But back to the article, what if I told you I had conclusive proof that the moon landings were faked, but I had been told to keep it under wraps by BBC bosses, acting under orders from the CIA or NSA. Most of you think I had finally lost my mind. But for some, the scenario, a journalist working for the mainstream media organization being manipulated by shadowy forces to keep this information from the public would seem entirely plausible or even likely. It says we live in a golden age for conspiracy theories, a growing assumption that everything we are told by the authorities is wrong or not quite as it seems. That's the truth, and it's being manipulated or obscured by powerful vested interests. A columnist says that the reason we have conspiracy theories is that sometimes governments and organizations do conspire. Sometimes. It would be wrong to write off all conspiracy theorists as swivel-eyed loons. Poor hygiene and live in their mother's basement. He doesn't say that, but that's usually what you get in trolls. They are not all crazy. The difficult part are those of us trying to make sense of the complex world is working out which parts of the conspiracy theory to keep up and which to throw away. I think there's some truth to that as far as alternative media and stuff goes. And, reality is so convoluted, it's hard to really make up what's the truth and what's not. A good example is the whole Syria thing about chemical weapons. That to me just kind of boggles me. Guardian's reporting that the end of the New World Order is here. And this, this term, is thrown around a lot by conspiracy theorists, but I've mentioned this before. There's always going to be orders as long as people have handed over their decision making to a bureaucracy or some kind of system like that, and they consolidate to the point to where these huge mega states or trading blocks, basically what we have today, you're going to have some kind of world order, different variations of it. So it's not the end of the New World Order, maybe the end of the last world order, and you can type that in. It's not even really worth my time of reading this stuff, all the terms that they use. The dollar looking increasingly less almighty. Europeans 13 years ago sought to launch a rival reserve currency in the euro, but after having a good go at it, they look like they have failed. The rising Asian currencies don't like the king dollar either. They're saying China wants to have their yuan basically become the reserve currency. Neither the Chinese currency nor the euro are in position to supplant the U.S. dollar, which accounts for more than 60% of global reserves, but the governments and private investors are far more alert to possible alternatives than before. They're talking about another fiscal showdown as soon as January or February is on everyone's minds. Yeah, you remember the Chinese saying that calling on the world to de-Americanize. U.S. banks are told to be prepared for a 30-day crisis. The biggest banks would be required to hold enough easily sold assets to survive a 30-day credit drought under proposed new Federal Reserve liquidity laws. An economist, I think it's Paul Craig Roberts, a U.S. already third world economy. Yeah, Paul Craig Roberts says that the U.S. has already become a third world economy as the world superpower continues to offshore its gross domestic product. America is in the toilet and the rest of the world knows it. More small businesses close as memberships decline in golf clubs. More university graduates return home to live with their parents who are drawing down their savings to live. It says with the world moving away from using the dollar to settle international accounts, the Fed prints more dollars. The rate at which foreign holders of dollar assets sell off their holdings will rise. Which is why U.S. neocons who rule Washington and their Israeli ally are determined to get Washington and the U.S. back into another war. China is signaling unprecedented policy changes on agenda. The Chinese Politburo said reforms to be discussed at the Communist Party meeting next month will be unprecedented, adding to signs that the leaders are resolved to spur far-reaching policy changes. Like New World Order, it's not going to be that much different. People are still going to be exploited. Governments are still going to be corrupt. The air is still going to be dirty and polluted. People will be cut out of the decision-making process, and they'll be separated from the resources. And they'll still call it communism, even though they're just about as capitalistic and free market as the United States. When I say free market, I don't mean actual free market, but 5 dead, 38 injured in car explosion at Tiananmen Square. The Post is reporting a fire near the square this afternoon. It says there's rumors emerging and being quickly deleted off Weibo, with users speculating that the flames are the results of a self-immolation incident. The last self-immolation incident at Tiananmen Square took place in 2011, but went unreported by Chinese media. Electric utility executives are worrying about solar panels. Sitting on a rooftop soaking up sun, the humble solar panel may not look like a threat to the multi-billion-dollar industry, but some electric utility executives say it is. They even have a name for the nightmare scenario solar could create. It's called the death spiral. With more people going to solar panels and increasing efficiency of homes, it says that they could erode the utilities' ability to grow. California utilities get paid based on the value of the assets they own, the transmission lines, substations, and wires. As more businesses and homeowners generate their own electricity, the utilities won't need as many of those assets as before. At the same time, the cost of maintaining electricity grids might fall on fewer and fewer non-solar utility customers. The companies could compensate by tacking on fixing monthly charges for all customers, solar and non-solar alike, but those new charges would jack up bills, and that could prompt more people to slap panels on their roofs. The problem will only get worse if advanced battery packs become cheap enough for home use, parked in the basement by the water heater. It's kind of like the Who Killed the Electric Car documentary, and the battery that's already been created to travel, 300 miles or something like that. But that's probably locked away in some warehouse. And you probably heard of the story in North Dakota about this white supremacist town. They actually said here that the town's banning new buildings and attempt to deter construction of the mini white settlement. I found it kind of funny that they went in here and they said that they're working on an ordinance that require Cobb to install water and sewer services in his house. It says that they're living in there with space heaters and no working furnace. Anyone without water and sewer will have 30 days to come into compliance and face fines. They've done that too with the one guy that was trying to live on a trailer. He was living in a trailer on his own property, I think. And they basically had to kick him out by force. They did the same thing about the ordinances. You have to have a sewer and have lines, and that helps the utility companies too, so they can feed off you. The PC is not dead. We just don't need new ones. It says PC sales are plunging. I've heard that too, but they're equating it with people not using them as much because of laptops and cell phones, which is probably true. They're saying the reason we're not buying them anymore is because they're pretty efficient as far as processing power and that. Not like the older ones you bought in 2004. Kids should spend no more than 2 hours online per day, warns the doctors. But they don't know how parents are going to enforce it, and I don't think that they will either. There was even a story about a kid that punched or beat up or even shot or killed his mom over having their cell phone taken away. A new milestone, 40% of babies use a mobile phone or tablet before they can even speak full sentences. Experts say cell phone users are guinea pigs in worldwide tests. One study found an almost 300% increase in brain tumor risk. It's kind of like that teen GMO activist said that we need more testing. And Kevin O'Leary said, "We are the lab rats."